1,000 years. But right now we want to bring on our friend from ESPN. He's ACC reporter David Hale. And David, lots to talk to you about. Thanks for joining as always. But you're about a week removed now from spending 24 hours in a Bucky. So I just want to make like wellness check. How are we doing after that?
My kidneys have been replaced by brisket, and most of my bloodstream is gravy related. But other than that, everything's fine.
All right. Explain to a Syracuse audience, who I imagine many here have not been to a Bucky's, what exactly that is and what exactly you got yourself into.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's sort of like if like a 7-Eleven and a Walmart and a Wegmans and then like a fireworks store all had like a baby together. That would be Bucky's. There's not really a lot of like technically it's a gas station and convenience store, but there's like part of it that is like the little sales shop in a Cracker Barrel. Like there's part of it that is just like an estate sale at an insane asylum. It doesn't. There's not a lot of good ways to explain what a Bucky's is other than to just go and experience it for yourself.
All right, I'm going to have to look out for my next estate sale at an insane asylum to check that out. If I saw this, I don't know how many outfit changes you did. Did I see you wearing a Winners Get Washed shirt at some point during your Bucky's experience there?
Yes, I actually wore it through the car wash at Bucky's, which, fun fact, is the second longest car wash in the continental United States.
Okay.
So I felt like that was appropriate.
Okay. I don't know. Fran Brown was probably at the longest car wash in the continental United States.
Fran Brown is not cheaping out on the best possible car wash.
All right.
I'm not making that type of NIL money.
No, I want to get into this scheduling agreement here with Clemson and Notre Dame with you. What do you make of Fran's off season here? It feels like this dude is making news like every 7 minutes. I don't know how he's keeping up the pace. What do you make of Fran Brown off season here headed to year 2?
Yeah, this may be, I don't know if this is an indelicate way of putting things, but I have referred to him with a few people as being Dion but genuine. Like he thinks outside the box. He understands the role of the attention economy and what that means for Syracuse. He genuinely cares about his dudes. He just looks at it all differently, I think, than a lot of traditional, the more traditional coaches do. And I think that is great for Syracuse. It is great for me because it makes for good stories and good content. Like every time you sit down with Fran and talk to him, like set aside the amount of news that he has made, like just sit down and talk to him about like college football or life or whatever, and you will hear sort of a different perspective than I think you will hear from almost anybody else coaching college football. He's unique, and that is awesome.
Yeah, and it feels like, he's 41, maybe I forget when his birthday is. He might be 42 by now, but it feels like he is understanding the current era just like differently than everybody else, right? Like yesterday when the news came out that he signed with an NIL agency. Like coaches have been doing commercials and selling stuff for years. He's the first guy to say he's doing NIL. It's the same thing, but he's speaking the language of everybody.
Yeah, in some ways it's like you almost kind of can't really credit it because these are things like I feel like anyone should have thought of. It's just like it was so plainly there in your face to do, and no one did it. So like in some ways like. Well, yeah, of course, do that. But on the other hand, like, brilliant that like you saw through all of the BS that everybody else like lives by and said like, well, wait a minute, why am I not doing this? It is not at all unlike about 100 other things that he does where it's like, well, okay, I'm not going to throw the showers in there. That makes no sense to me. But the rest of the stuff is like, yeah, man, like this resonates with people who need to hear it. And again, it's sort of like, it is funny in a world in which college football, in which dollars talk more than they ever have, and certainly he's done a good job of bringing in dollars to Syracuse so they can go out and get some players that they probably were not getting before. But, we hear the term attention economy all the time. Syracuse was a non-entity in football for a long, long time, and people who are not Syracuse fans are apt to pay attention now because he's interesting and says interesting things and has interesting ideas. Like, there is of value in that. And I'm not sure what the exchange rate between actual currency and attention currency is, but it's not zero. And he's doing as good, again, outside of Deion, as good of managing that.
We got David Hale of ESPN with us, and that does spin into what we're talking about today. Like, the ACC is trying to figure out a way to monetize the attention currency, right, with television ratings and how they're going to be dividing the revenue pie. And now Clemson and Notre Dame are going to be playing every year here for a 12-year period starting in a couple of years. Like, how do these things transition into one each other? Like, it's easy to look and say, all right, a highly rated football game does make you more money. How does this all add up to what's going on in the ACC right now?
Yeah, well, for Clemson, this is just a stroke of brilliance on a lot of different levels. One, if you're in the ACC, getting eyeballs means a lot because, A, you need more eyeballs because the ACC is making less money, but B, they have agreed to this new brand initiative where the schools with the highest ratings are going to get a higher percentage of TV distribution money, and playing Notre Dame helps your ratings, period. So this locks that up for Clemson. Two, if you're in the ACC and you don't win the conference, there is always going to be some discussion of strength of schedule and did you deserve it compared to an SEC team. Well, adding Notre Dame to your schedule helps that. And then C, there is a lot of sort of uncertainty about what future scheduling is going to look like. The SEC is talking about potentially going to 9 conference games. Well, Clemson's got Georgia and Oklahoma on their schedule 6 times over the next 12 years. And nothing is official on that yet, but there's certainly a risk that if the SEC goes to 9 games, that those games could get canceled. Mm-hmm. Well, this is your insurance policy here. So Clemson is in a win-win-win situation with this, not to mention the fact that they haven't played a ton, but when they have played, it has largely been some very, very good football games. So all of that is great for Clemson. It's good for the ACC because it brings some attention to the league, certainly. Is it good for the other teams that may not make as much money and would like to be playing Notre Dame more themselves? You'll find probably different answers from different people on that. But this is sort of the world that I think the ACC is living in, is trying to find ways to maximize your revenue in a world in which the TV pie that you're going to get is smaller than the TV pie of your neighbors in the Big Ten or the SEC. And this is one way to do that. It's probably not the only way. And I think all schools are trying to kind of figure out, like, what is our methodology? I mean, if you're Syracuse is playing somebody like Notre Dame every year, makes sense. It might. And, if you're Wake Forest, does it make sense? Probably not, because frankly, those are games you're going to lose. But the ACC in general, and they're going to meet in Amelia Island for the spring meetings next week, and this is one of the big topics, is like, what does scheduling look like? And this is, in an ideal world, how do we want to handle scheduling? It's true for both football and basketball right now. So I think you're going to see them move back to an 18-game conference slate for basketball to give their powers, well, really everybody, a little more leeway in how they want to set their own schedules. And for football, they're really looking for ways to create more high-profile TV games for football in the ACC, because one of the things that we saw this past year with the SEC moving over to ESPN 100% was the ACC was all but shut out of, like, prime time big games on ABC or ESPN proper. Like, they had almost none of those time slots. So creating must-see content is a huge thing for the ACC, not just Clemson, Notre Dame, but I think across the board they're trying to find ways to make this happen more often.
And obviously, David, like, this is part of what got decided when those lawsuits got ended back in March or whenever it was, that TV ratings and other brand awareness stuff is going to be part of the revenue split. I had been under the impression, and I get everything's open for negotiations these days, that like this Notre Dame 5-game-a-year ACC schedule been planned out like long in advance. I think Syracuse has a Notre Dame game on the schedule for like 2037 or something like that. Like, are these games potentially affected? Maybe not Syracuse, but somebody in the league because of this Clemson agreement? Had that not all been fleshed out? Where is that with Notre Dame playing the other teams in the league?
Well, you've hit on a really good question. I am told by the conference that aside from the years where Clemson was already set to play Notre Dame, those Notre Dame games will be in addition to the 5 that the ACC already has with Notre Dame. But this is all a little bit of a gray area. For one, when they added Stanford, Cal, and SMU to the ACC, they basically didn't adjust the Notre Dame schedule at all as a result of that, except Stanford already plays Notre Dame every year. How is that going to be calculated? Yeah, how is that going to be calculated into the 5-game thing? And will SMU and Cal get a bite at the apple of Notre Dame? Which certainly I'm sure they would like one. And then, again, do you want to play? I mean, there's been discussion about can we get Notre Dame and FSU or Notre Dame and Miami more often, because those games will be high profile for our league in a way that frankly, Notre Dame and Syracuse probably isn't. But, if you're Syracuse or Boston College or whoever, I want Notre Dame on my schedule. So I expect that at the ACC meetings next week, there's going to be quite a bit of conversation around Notre Dame. And all of that is not acknowledging that Notre Dame has some say in this, too. And Pete Bavacqua, their AD, I'm not sure exactly where his head is, because some of the rumblings that I had heard initially were that he assumed that these games would be part of the 5-game schedule that he has to play the ACC. So I think there is still some I's to be dotted and some lowercase J's dotted, what have you.
Yeah, and Notre Dame, as always, right? Like they got the power here, especially after making the title game last year and getting all of that money, right? Like they don't have to listen to anybody on anything right now. They are in the.
I mean, look. What you used to be able to say was Notre Dame was taking less TV money to not be in a conference. That is factually inaccurate now, because that was a boon for them financially last year. Like, everything is setting up, and kudos to Pete Bavacqua, because if independence is a priority for Notre Dame, he is really in a very good position with that right now, unless we get to a point where there's super conferences and Notre Dame is sort of forced to pick a side. But until that happens, there's not a whole lot of incentive for Notre Dame to do anything that Notre Dame doesn't want to do.
No, not when you just hey, here's $100 million. Like they're good. They're good fiscally. We got David Hale from ESPN with us. One thing that popped out to me from your article about this today was something that Dan Radakovich said, the Miami AD, the former Clemson AD. He almost, it felt like he just casually just floated this. That just like, by the by, maybe we could have divisions again, but, divided by brand. That was like a, whoa. Wait a minute. The fact that he just casually tossed that out loud there, that was interesting.
Yeah, and I will give Radakovich credit. He says a lot of the things that other ADs won't say, because he has the luxury of having worked in this league for a really long time, and probably not for that much longer before he wants to call it a career. Mm-hmm. And so there are no consequences to him saying these things. Look, he has been an outside-the-box thinker about what the future of the ACC and college athletics is for a long time. So I think, this is a little bit probably of him throwing an idea out there to see what the response is. But, I can also see some value in general. Like, yes, monetarily, does it hurt if you're not getting a bunch of big games? Like, it's not to say that those, like, if you split, let's say you split into 2 divisions and there was a division with the 8 biggest brands and then the 9 other brands, and how you would split that up, I have no idea, because, good luck deciding who the 8th versus the 9th biggest brand in the ACC is. But let's say you did that. Well, it creates more inventory, this top inventory for ESPN. So maybe you get a little more money from ESPN, and that helps everybody. And then it's almost a little bit like the NFL scheduling model, where, it's not a bunch of games or whatever, but like if you finish dead last in the NFC East one year, you're going to play the last place team from one of the other divisions as part of your schedule. Your schedule gets a little bit easier because you finished last. I think there could be something to that. If Syracuse, let's say, theoretically is not in the top brand division, and they're in the lower division, well, okay, you're bummed that you're not necessarily going to have Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech on your schedule, but maybe you have Wake Forest, Boston College, and Cal on your schedule, and you've got 3 easier wins. So as you are looking at a potential playoff run, you're probably going to have to defend your strength of schedule, but you've got a much better chance at finishing with 10, 11, 12 wins against a lesser schedule than you do if all of those teams. Now, I would also argue the flip side of this is the ACC, if it were to do something like this, could be shooting itself in the foot by taking all of its biggest brands, making them play each other, and end up with 4 losses on their resume.
Yeah, the SEC can survive that. I don't know if ACC schools can exactly survive that. Let me just loop this back to the beginning here, David, as we wrap it up. Like the Fran Brown of all of this, when you talk about Syracuse as a brand here, like it feels like Fran has changed the brand, right, in the last year. How much can one guy, right, like have an effect on things like that?
Well, again, I mean, look at Deion. Like, nobody cared about Colorado before Deion's there. Now, would people continue to care about Colorado after Deion leaves? I think that is a very open question. At some point, does winning 8 or 9 games at Colorado with Deion there stop being interesting? I think that's an open question. But what you get, I mean, look, Syracuse won 10 games last year.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen a lot. If you can keep building on that, like Manny Diaz is trying to do a little bit of the same thing at Duke, where like, hey, he went out and got some names at quarterback the last couple of years. They won 9 games. Like, if you can build something over a more sustained period of time, it does start to change the conversation. Like, and we are in a different world now where, like, the biggest problems that Syracuse had in the old regime was, like, there's not a lot of recruits in upstate New York, and you don't have all the facilities and nice things that the SEC has. Like, it's hard to build a winning team there. Well, look, if you've got donors who are interested because Fran Brown has made them care about the program, you put a couple of winning seasons together where players know that they can go there, win, and get drafted, and you've got some money to spend, well, now all of a sudden the dynamic has changed. And look, you know, under the old regime, and you go back to the 50s and 60s, like Syracuse was a player in college football. The world changes, and it doesn't always mean that it's going to be just because Alabama and the SEC have dominated for the last 20 years does not guarantee that the next 20 years are going to look the same. So what he's doing is smart in saying, like, I'm not going to be beholden to the way that things have always been, and I'm going to try to convince you to feel the same way. I think he's doing a really good job of it so far. But those things, what they don't do is change overnight. And what they don't do is change with one 10-win season. He's got a point where people are, like, asking good questions now. They're like, hey, what about Syracuse? You got to build on that. You got to keep building on that momentum. You can't go back to 6-6 this year because a lot of the air will get let out of the balloon.
And you very well might, because the schedule is just brutally insane this season for Syracuse. All right, last thing, David, before we let you go, you mentioned ACC meetings next week. Any major things? You mentioned basketball schedule. Any major things you're keeping your eye on at that next week?
No, like, this is the crazy thing is, like, the last few years it's been like, is the whole conference going to fall apart in the island? And this year it's going to be a little more boring. Scheduling and the Notre Dame component and basketball scheduling, that will all be discussed. We're going to have certainly a lot of conversations around the House settlement and rev share and some of that stuff. Obviously, there's still conversations about what's going to happen with roster limits to get the House settlement over the finish line. I think we'll have some additional discussions about, you know, revenue distribution in the college football playoff. But, it's administrative business, basically, which is what these meetings were always supposed to be. They just haven't been for the last couple of years.
No, 2 years ago, they're taking secret votes of who might leave the league together. Now maybe they can just go play golf again like you're supposed to with these things.
Exactly.
All right, David, great to chat as always. Thanks for hopping on. I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
All right, good talking to you.
All right, there he is, David Hale, ESPN, always fascinating, and he survived a Bucky's. I have not been to a Bucky's in my life, much to my great shame. Most of them are in Texas. I've heard they're life-changing experiences, but we'll see if we can work that in. Best I can figure, the closest one is in Kentucky.